Hey guys, before round 2 of TikTok Cup Season 3 starts, and for those of you who care about the point system for this tournament, I just want to go over how the point system is actually going to work for these next 25 races. The cars were seeded 1 through 75 victors being the victors of the last tournaments that you saw, and they're all going to be competing each other in this format. For these 25 races, the first 25 seeded cars, with number 1 being the Ford GT, 2 being the McLaren, 3 being Twin Mill, all the way down to 25 being the Huracan, will be going last for all of the first races. Then the 26th seed, we have the Ford Mustang here, is going to be going second for all of these races, and as you can guess, 26, 27, 28, all of the seeds going back down to the 50th seed, which is Luigi. Finally leaving the 51st seed to be this Ford, which will go all the way down until the 75th seed, which is the Prius Taxi. So the faster cars are predicted to be winning these next races, but there can be upsets, which is going to be very exciting to watch. That's just a brief update on the point system for these next races. I hope you guys are enjoying the series as I am, and it's going to get very intense here very soon. So keep watching. I'll see you guys in the next race. Starting off round 2 on the TikTok Cup Season 3, we have the Ford GT40. Ford GT fast, but not going to make it to the turn. Not bad for the Ford. Next up, we have the Ford Shelby GT500. Shelby's fast is going to pass the Ford and get around that third bend, thus eliminating the Ford and having the Shelby win. I guess they're both Fords, but whatever. And lastly, we have our number 1 seed for the tournament, the Ferrari F40. This thing is blazing fast. Just take a look at it go around that turn. Blows by the Shelby and is going to do a very good on the track. The Shelby is unfortunately eliminated, but the number 1 seed, that Ferrari, just looks so good. Next up on the track, we have the Aston Martin DBS. That DBS is fast, but can it get to the third corner? It does not look like it. Still though, not bad for the Aston Martin. Next up, we have the McLaren Speedtail. This Speedtail's very fast, pulling it through for McLaren, gets around that turn and ends off on the 4th straight. It beats out the Aston Martin and does a very good run. And finally, we have the number 2 seed in the tournament. We have the McLaren 720 Spider from Matchbox. Oh, this thing has so much speed under the wheels, gets around the turn and just barely passes the Speedtail. The McLaren pretty far away from the number 1 seed. Maybe it'll lose a few spots, but the McLaren 720S is going to take the win today. Next up on the track, we have the Alpine A110. Alpine's pretty quick. Will it get to the turn? Just barely. A solid run for the Alpine. Next up, we have the silver Koenigsegg Jesko. Look at that Jesko go. It is very fast, gets around the 3rd corner with ease. Pretty solid run for the Jesko. And finally, we have the number 3 seed for the tournament. We have the Twin Mill. Twin Mill has so much speed. Look at that, takes the corner, surpasses the McLaren and almost the Ferrari. Twin Mill beats out the Jesko and does very good on the track. Twin Mill's going to be a car to watch for the rest of this tournament. Next up on the track, we have Kylo Ren. Kylo Ren's fast, but doesn't make it to the turn. And if you don't make it to the turn, well, are you really that fast? Right behind him, we have Captain America. The Cap is pretty fast, passes Kylo Ren and gets around the turn. Look at that, he keeps rolling. Solid performance for the Cap. And finally, we have the Jaguar E-Pace. That E-Pace is fast. Look at the speed it has going around those corners, and it is going to surpass first place on the track. Cap is unfortunately defeated, but that I-Pace is blazing fast as it takes first place on the TikTok Cup. Next up on the track, we have the Porsche 918 Spider. 919 Spider does well around the turns, but doesn't get to the 3rd one. Unfortunate for the Porsche. Next up, we have the Hyundai Genesis Coupe. This thing's pretty fast. You can hear it under the wheels, but it doesn't even make it around the 3rd turn. Still beats out the Porsche, but not the fastest car we've seen by far. And finally, we have the Ferrari F12 Berlinetta. Look at that Ferrari go, hauls it around the turn, and a pretty solid performance for the Ferrari. Wow, my stuff is bad. The Ferrari beats out the Hyundai and moves on to the next round. Next up, we got the Ferrari P4. P4 slamming against the turns, not a good performance whatsoever. Not that good for the Ferrari. Next up, however, is the Sesto Elemento from Lamborghini. Look at that Sesto go, completes the third corner like a boss. Pretty good for the Lamborghini. And finally, we have the Porsche Carrera with the faster than ever wheels. Look at the Porsche go, haul it around that third turn. Very good performance for the Porsche. Beating out the Lamborghini, the Porsche is going to be moving on to the next round. Next up, we have the Ferrari FXX. The FXX has a lot of speed. Will he make it to the third corner? Doesn't look like it. Still, though, not bad for the Ferrari. Next up, we have the Audi RS5 going backwards. The Audi has the speed going backwards, passes the FXX, but doesn't get around the third corner. Sorry about that, but Audi stuck on the corner. And up last, we have the blazing fast Koopa Troopa. Koopa obviously has the speed, gets around the corner, and ends off on the fourth straight. Beating out the backwards Audi, Koopa Troopa's moving on to the next round. Up next, we have the Mazda RX-3. RX-3 hauls it around the corners, but doesn't get to the third one. That's unfortunate. One of the slower cars we've seen so far. Next up, we got a Chevy Impala stock car. The Impala's quick. Does he have what it takes? He doesn't get around the third corner. Still, though, not bad for a NASCAR. And finally, we have a Mazda RX-7 Drift. The RX-7 has a lot of speed, hauling it around the third turn. Not bad for the Mazda. The Mazda is going to be taking the win, beating out the NASCAR, and moving on to the next round. Next up, we have the BMW M3 GT2. M3 GT2 with that low splitter doesn't hit the corners very well, but not bad for a BMW. Next up, we have a dark gray Koenigsegg Jesko. The Jesko is a fast casting. Let's see how this one does. Doesn't even get around the third corner. The car's fast, but not that fast. And finally, we have a Honda Civic Si. This Honda Civic's fast. It hauls around the third corner and does well on the fourth straight. The Koenigsegg Jesko gets beat out, and the Honda Civic's going to be taking the win, moving on to the next round. Up next, we have Paul Walker's Subaru WRX. The Subaru doesn't do that bad, but doesn't get to the third corner. Unfortunate for the Subaru. Next up on the track, we have an Acura Integra. Look at the Acura go. It's going to haul it and not get around the third corner. Beats out the Subaru. Pretty good for the Acura. And finally, we have Tanuki Mario. Tanuki Mario is fast, hauling it around that third corner on the fourth straight. Does pretty well. Acura is going to get beat out by Tanuki Mario, taking the win. Moving on to the next round. Next up is a fan favorite. We've got Thomas. Thomas is fast, but not fast enough to get to that third corner. The fan favorite doesn't do so good. Next up, we have Lego Bone Shaker with a Stormtrooper. The Stormtrooper is hauling, doesn't get around the third corner. Still, though, not bad for Stormtrooper. And finally, we have Yellow Yoshi. On two wheels, gets around the third corner, and wins the race. Stormtrooper unfortunately gets dethroned by Yellow Yoshi, who moves on to the next round. Next up, we got that Tesla Model S. The Tesla Model S in black does well, but doesn't get to the turn. Unfortunate, but he's not going to be moving on. Next up, we have Waluigi. Can Waluigi beat the Tesla? It looks like it, as he even completes the third turn. This is pretty good. Can he cause an upset? Right behind him, we have the Toyota Supra. How can it do? The Supra's fast. Does he have the speed to pass Waluigi? It looks like it, and the Supra pulling off a fantastic run. Waluigi, as the second car, got around the turn, but wasn't fast enough because that Supra hauled and takes the win, moving on to the next round. Up next, we have the Jurassic Park Jeep. The Jeep doing semi-well around those corners. Is he going to get to the third one? Doesn't look like it. The Jurassic Park Jeep ends off on the third straight. Up next, we have General Grievous. General Grievous is pretty fast. It passes the Jeep and ends off on the turn. Still, though, not bad for Grievous. And lastly, we have the notorious BMW M3. M3 takes the corner, beats out Grievous, and puts up a pretty good time. Grievous is defeated, and the BMW M3 moves on to the next round. Up next, we have a Lamborghini Sesto Elemento. The Sesto, pretty fast, but doesn't get to that turn. An unfortunate performance for all the cars that just can't get here. Next up, we got the Nissan Skyline R34. The R34 is also quick and just barely beats the Sesto. Not bad for the GTR. And finally, we have the Hot Wheels ID Batmobile. Does the Batmobile have the speed? Just barely, as he beats the GTR. The R34 is dethroned, and Batman's going to move on to the next round. Next up, we have the Lancia Stratos. The Stratos is fast, but doesn't put up a good time. An unfortunate performance for a sick car. Up next, we have a Dodge Viper. The Viper is fast, faster than the Lancia, but doesn't get to the turn. That's just an overall disappointing performance. And finally, we have the Barbie Corvette Convertible. The Barbie Convertible is very fast as it gets around the corner, passes the Dodge, and takes the win. The Dodge is defeated, and the Barbie takes the win, moving on to the next round. Next up, we have Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker's fast, but not fast enough to get to the turn. An unfortunate end for Luke. Next up, we have the Formula E car. Formula E car has some speed and just doesn't get around the third corner. Still, though, pretty close for the Formula E car. And finally, we have the Datsun 510 wagon. Oh no, the Datsun doesn't carry a lot of speed. Is this going to be an upset? It is. The Datsun loses to the Formula E car. An unfortunate upset for the Datsun, but the Formula E car is going to take the win, moving on to the next round. Next up, we have the Matchbox Bugatti Divo. The Divo getting loose, but not a good performance. Not even coming close to the turn. Next up, we have the faster than ever Ferrari California. This Ferrari is fast, holding its speed well, and it's going to get around that bend. Really good for the Ferrari. And up last, we have the one, the only Lakitu. Lakitu has the speed. Does he have the speed to beat the Ferrari? Just barely. The Ferrari put up a great performance, but Lakitu is going to be taking the win, moving on to the next round. Next up, we have a 69 Copo Camaro. The Copo Camaro for a Hot Wheels ID car doesn't do very well. I think that's what I said last time it ran, but still not a good performance. Next up, we have Roger Dodger. Roger Dodger is fast, passes the Camaro, and just barely doesn't get around the corner. But solid for a Hot Wheels ID car, I guess. And finally, we have the notorious Ferrari 458. 458 is fast, ripping it around the corners, gets around the third corner, and ends off on the fourth straight pretty far. The 458 is going to take the win, moving on to the next round. Next up, we have Spider-Man. Spider-Man, not the best performance, not getting to the turn. As usual, they just don't get there. Right behind it, we have the Corvette C8R. C8R has some speed behind it, but doesn't get around the turn. A fast car just doesn't put it up. And up last, we have Diva. Diva is absolutely pulling it down, gonna take the win on the 4th straight. A great performance from Diva, taking the win, moving on, beating out the Corvette. Next up, we have the new C8 Corvette. From Matchbox, the C8 Corvette tries his best, but doesn't get to the turn. But that's to be expected from these first round cars. Next up, we got a red F1 car. Oh, the red F1 car sticks a wheel out, gets loose, but still beats out the Corvette. He holds on and beats out the Corvette. Wow. And finally, we have the Range Rover Velar. Now, we know the Velar has a lot of speed. How can he do on the 4th straight? Pretty good. He passes a lot of cars. The Velar is going to take it. Moving on to the next round, beating out the F1 car. Next up, we have the ID Mercedes AMG. That thing has a very low splitter, not very fast around the corners, and just not very good for that Mercedes. Next up, we have a Lotus Evora. The Evora hopping all around that front straightaway is going to get to the 3rd corner, but not complete it. Can he hold off his next competitor? Because right behind him, we have a Nissan GTR R34. The R34 is blazing fast. You can hear it under the wheels, but he doesn't have the speed. The R34 is going to lose it to the Evora. Just a slow and unfortunate run for that GTR. The Lotus Evora is going to take the win and move on to the next round. Next up on the Hot Wheels track, we have the Pagani Huayra. The Huayra are not putting up a good time at all. I mean, if he can't get to the corner, he's not moving on. Next up, we have the Datsun 240Z. 240Z is pretty speedy, but also doesn't get to the corner. I mean, it was a solid performance, but not good enough. And finally, let's see how Daisy can do. Daisy's fast in that Wild Wing, gets a little loose and doesn't even get around the corner. Daisy's still going to beat out the Datsun, but not as good of a performance as I thought. But she is moving on to the next round. Next up on the track, we have a Mazda MX-5. The MX-5, one of the slower cars we've seen, doesn't even get around the 2nd turn. I mean, congrats to him getting here, but wow, that's slow. Right behind him, though, we have the Robo Race Robo Car. The Robo Car has the speed around the corners, but doesn't get to the 3rd one. Still, though, he beats the Mazda, which I guess really wasn't that hard. And up last, we have the classic Mario. Mario hauling it around those turns, gets around the 3rd turn, and ends off on the 4th straight right next to Yellow Yoshi. Not bad for Mario. He's going to be moving on, beating out the Robo Race Robo Car to the next round. Next up, one of the slowest cars we've seen, the number 15 NASCAR. Look at that, going to end off on the 2nd turn. At least they made it to the 1st round, I guess. Right behind him, we have the Matchbox Audi R8. This Audi R8 is quick, and he's going to get to the 3rd corner. If all else fails, that was a pretty solid performance for the R8. And lastly, we have a red Hot Wheels Corvette. This Corvette has the speed. Can he pass the Audi? It looks like he will, just barely. The Audi is unfortunately dethroned by the Corvette in this race as the Corvette moves on to the next round. And for the last round of the 2nd round, starting us off, we have the Taxi. The Taxi. Unfortunate. The Taxi just did not do very good, I'm sorry. Right behind it, though, we have Luigi. Luigi is quick, passes the Taxi, ends off on the 3rd straight. If all else fails, Luigi did okay. And for our last run of the 2nd round, we have the Lamborghini Huracan Performante. The Huracan is fast. He gets a little loose. Can he pass Luigi? He will. Unfortunate, but Luigi's getting eliminated, and the Lamborghini's moving on to the next round. We have a lot of cars ready for the next round. Stay tuned.